I'm Mark Golub, and as the Jewish world celebrates the birthday of the State of Israel, Yom Ha'atzmaut, we thought it would be wonderful to speak with someone who was actually in Israel on the 5th of Iyar in 1948. The day David ben-gurion declared the establishment of the Jewish State of Israel. So how pleased I am to introduce you to Rochelle Etingin, who's a fifth-generation Sabra born in pre-state Palestine. She was a high school graduate and already a member of the IDF on the day Israel was born. I'm also proud to say Rochelle and her husband Max and members of her wonderful family, especially their daughter Orly, are dear and precious friends. It is so wonderful to have you here and be able to sit with you as we celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut. Thank you for doing this. So I want the audience to learn all about you. So you were already a high school graduate, correct?
Yes.
In May of 1948.
Yeah. Our school year was curtailed, was shortened by a couple of months. We graduated in April, and right away we're into the Army, and therefore I was in the Army before May 15th, 1948.
Okay. Let's go back. Okay. Fifth generation. How does your ancestors, your family, arrive in Palestine?
I don't know how they arrived. I know they arrived in the early 1800s.
Yes.
And I know more of my mother's family than my father.
Where were they from?
My mother's family comes from Austria. My mother's father was born in Austria. I have his passport. It says that he was born in Austria, but he's a Palestinian citizen.
Interesting.
Yeah. As I am a Palestinian citizen too.
Yes, yes.
Because on my birth certificate it said I was born in Palestine.
Yes.
Tiberias, Palestine.
Do you have the passport?
Sure.
You do?
Sure.
Do you have any passport that calls you an Israeli, says you're an Israeli?
Yes.
So you have both?
I have both.
You have a Palestinian passport and an Israeli passport.
Right.
How lucky are you?
Yeah.
And you have an American passport?
An American
Okay,
passport.
very good. Okay.
On my American passport it said I was born in Palestine.
Yes, you know, because it can't say Israel.
Correct.
Yes. Okay, so on one side of your family, your father's side?
My father's side, they came from Russia, and I don't know much beyond my grandfather. Mm-hmm. I know that my grandfather came from Russia and settled in Tzfat. On my mother's side, I know more. They came in the early 1800s, because I know from stories of the family that my grandmother's father was a young man in 1837 in Tzfat when there was an earthquake. And he was the one who rushed into the synagogue and saved the Torah. The Sefer Torah.
Do you know his name?
No, Schechter was his name.
Schechter.
Yeah, but I don't know his first name.
It's okay.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful story to have in
Yes.
one's family,
Yes,
isn't it?
and that goes back
Yes.
that many years. So her father was born in Austria. My mother's father was born in Austria.
Okay.
But came to Israel as a young man.
Okay, so your father's name was?
Yosef.
And your mother's name was?
Shoshana.
Yosef and Shoshana.
Right.
And Yosef and Shoshana both come from Tzfat. Do they remain in Tzfat?
No.
Where do they go?
My father had his business started in Tveria, Tiberias.
Yes.
And
What was his business?
He started very small. He had a few fishing boats with fishermen who, he sold their wares. But he became very quickly, he was importing fish and seafood from Turkey, Lebanon, and Syria, and traveled to these countries every year a few times.
Uh-huh.
And he was very, very, very fond of the people he was dealing with.
He was?
Yes.
The Arab people he was dealing
Correct.
with, he had no trouble with?
No trouble whatsoever. First of all, he was so fluent in Arabic. And second, so is my mother. And second, he liked them. He really liked them. He invited them to come to Israel with their wives, and they came. And my mother took their wives to the fancy stores in Tel Aviv and so on.
Do you remember meeting any of them?
Yes, yes. I remember Shahadi, whose son ended up in Washington here somewhere. I remember them. I have a picture of them, but I was a young girl.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what your father, and I assume your mother is at home.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then how many children do they have?
3.
So you have 2 siblings.
I'm the older one,
You're
the
the
oldest one. My sister, who just passed away recently,
I'm sorry.
and my brother, who was killed when he was serving in the army.
Yes.
He was 19.
Yes.
At
That
the
was a
war
real
of attrition.
tragedy. We'll come to that. Okay, so there are 3 of you. And as you're growing up in pre-state Palestine,
Right.
in Tiberias?
Right.
Okay. Did you grow up in fear?
I didn't until I was 6 years old, until I went to school, to first grade, and coming out of school, Arab children were stoning me, us, and spitting on us. I didn't know what was to be afraid of, but this was the reality.
Till then,
Yes.
you were a young child. You knew
yeah,
nothing.
knew
Okay.
nothing.
I should ask, in terms of your family's home growing up, you and your brother and sister, was it a warm home? As you look back, did you have a lovely childhood or a difficult childhood?
No, a wonderful childhood. My mother comes from a family of 10 children, so I had lots of aunts and uncles. Some of them ended up here many years before I was born, but most of them were in Israel, in Tzfat, in Tel Aviv, in Holon, and the family was always getting together, and it was very, very, very wonderful.
Did it have a Jewish flavor?
Definitely. Not religious, though. They were Jewish. First of all, we had a kosher home. And then I was surrounded by Jews, although my father's business was only with Arabs.
Yes.
And also we spoke Arabic at home because since I was 9 months old, we had a live-in housekeeper who was a Moroccan Jew who did not speak a word of Hebrew, could not learn because she was analphabetic. And so we learned Hebrew and Arabic at the same time.
So you were bilingual as a child,
Correct. I never knew how to read or write,
but you could speak and
I
you
could
would
speak.
understand.
and I understood.
Yes. A digression for one moment.
Yeah.
You know, it always surprises me and in some way saddens me that many Israelis grow up and do not know Arabic and do not know the culture that Israel is surrounded by Arab culture, most of which is hostile, and we don't know enough about them. We don't know about their culture, and we don't know their language, and you understand. Language is a window into a culture, so that your father understood in ways that other Israelis might not, and this generation of Israelis, which has grown up without Arabic,
Yeah.
doesn't.
Well, it should be taught in schools. It should be a required language, like English was a required language to be taught in school, and to have dialogues, to have maybe schools, Arab schools coming to the Jewish schools and vice versa, because there's a like a wall between them. Culturally, there's a wall between them.
And language is one way to overcome
That's
that
right.
wall.
That's right.
Okay, so you grow up, you have 2 languages in your home, and you learn English.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm listening to Jewish because my parents spoke Jewish between themselves.
Yiddish?
Yiddish.
Okay, so you're surrounded by languages.
Right.
Was there Shabbat in your home?
Yes, yes, yes. But we could go by car.
Yes.
But there was a Shabbat. You definitely felt the Shabbat, and there was always people coming in either Friday night or Saturday night to guests.
So as you think about your childhood, it was a very warm, wonderful home.
Correct.
Okay. And your father is dealing with the Arab population. We're talking here about the 1930s.
Right.
And then the early 40s.
Right.
And do you have any idea, either because you saw it or because you learned about it later, whether your father and mother leaned toward the Haganah or the Irgun?
My my parents leaned toward the Haganah. Yeah.
You paused, though.
Yes, because at one time I thought that maybe my father was more leaning towards the Etzel, you
Yes.
know, the Irgun, but no, they were both for the Haganah.
Were they opponents of Begin? When they talked to Begin, were they angry at him?
And they were not angry at him, but they were saying he is spoiling the soup.
Uh,
You know, he is making trouble.
okay.
But apparently he was not making trouble. Apparently, if not for him, it would not have been.
Yes.
Because
And you understand that now as an
yes,
adult?
yes.
Okay.
But but at that time, they were moderate. Yes.
And to what extent, if I had known you when you were 15, 16, would I have said, you know, Rochelle is very patriotic? Is that a word that had anything to do with Israelis?
No, at that point, let's say we were city people. I would never want to go to a kibbutz. It was not my cup of tea. I would not. But later on, I mean, most of the army, people of the leaders of the army were all kibbutzniks.
Was there a problem between Ashkenazim and Sephardim? And there were not that many Sephardic Jews there yet. There will be increasingly a larger and larger Sephardic population, and we may talk about that later. But there was a distinction even then.
Yes.
Did that matter to you and your father?
My father was very much not involved, but friendly with people who were Sephardic mostly. And in our home, on a Friday night or a Saturday, we would have a combination of couples who came who were Sephardic, and a couple of people who were from the Ashkenazi. They were very, very friendly and very sociable together. But if somebody said, I have somebody for you, let's say for your daughter, if he was Sephardic, they wouldn't want it.
Mm-hmm. They wanted Ashkenazi. So I asked you if was patriotism a word you would use to describe you and your friends?
No.
Okay.
No.
Did you care? Were you aware, and did you care about Palestine becoming a Jewish state? Did it matter to you?
Well, when the war was there, when first of all, I remember as a child riots, the Arabs rioting in Tiberias when I was a child, and screaming in the streets, "Itbachel Yahud," which means slaughter the Jews. So that
You remember that?
I remember that very well.
Still frightening to this day?
It is still frightening to this day. But I remember my father bringing his Arab friends to home and being so very friendly with them. And they invited us to their villages, and we felt so friendly to them. It was very strange.
Okay, so you're describing a paradox here.
Yes, yes.
On the one hand, on a personal level, your family, led by your father,
Right.
had lovely interrelationships
Correct.
with Arabs.
And the Sephardic also.
And the Sephardim, correct.
Yeah.
Interesting. At the same time, on a political level, you were aware there was a movement in the Arab world that wanted to slaughter you.
Right.
And you are a young child and then a teenage girl. That is scary.
It was very scary.
Okay.
It was very scary.
Did you end up hating anybody?
No way.
Why not?
No. Because it was not it's their leadership that was the problem, that caused the problems and led them astray, in my opinion. It was not the individuals, although as a child, and as I remember, the people who rioted were the people from the villages around Tiberias who came down with machetes and all that and went the streets and slaughtered Jews, the population, and burned the synagogue. So it was the problem was education. The problem was that these people were not educated, did not have any pride of who they were, and their leaders were leading them to the wrong conclusions.
You know, the problem exists to this day, and maybe we'll talk about it, but it's interesting to hear how you experienced it. And when I said to you, were you frightened? And you said yes. Does it mean that that was an ever-present fright?
No.
Why not?
No. Well, because you're involved with everyday life and you're surrounded by Jews, you're going to Jewish schools, that your friends are all Jewish. It was not a question that we thought about.
Okay.
Until they started making problems. Shooting at cars, like when we wanted to go from Tel Aviv to Tzfat to visit my grandparents. Sometimes we were not able to make the trip because the Arab villagers were shooting at cars that were going on the road.
You know, that sounds horrible.
It was horrible at the time, but you, as a young person, you sort of like get over it.
Okay. You get over it. That's how, and you continue to live.
You cope.
You cope. Okay. I asked you, though, whether at any point in your own life,
Yes.
as we come out of World War II and we're heading towards the UN resolution of 47 and then the establishment of 48, and by the way, I should have asked you, the British are there.
Right.
Okay. Were they in Tiberias?
Of course.
Of course.
They were
What
across
was-
the street from our house.
Across the street?
Yes. In the
Wha-
Feingold Hotel.
What was your relationship to them? What was your father's relationship to them?
No relationship. No relationship. Although my father's cousin was always entertaining British soldiers in his home. Yes. In Tiberias. But we had no relationship with them.
Do you remember how you felt about the British?
Until the the horrific hangings and all that, we did not. They did not count in our life, in our daily life. Definitely not.
Okay. And you're talking about the fact that the British at one point hung a number of Irgun members
Yeah.
that they captured, and then the Irgun hung
The
two
British soldiers. And then there was the
soldiers.
King David bombing.
Yeah. Do you remember that?
Of course. I remember my reaction was that this is terrible. This is terrible. I mean, because the whole thing was terrible. The whole thing. I don't remember talking to my father about that.
Okay.
But we all thought it was terrible.
I asked you if you hated the Arabs. You said no.
No.
Did you hate the British?
No, but I didn't like them. They were strangers in our country.
Uh-huh.
They were the strangers in our country. From many things, we felt that they were siding with the Arabs. And when it came to leaving, they left a lot of ammunition and a lot of things to the Arabs, and they were using it against us.
There also was the British blockade
The blockade
during
was
World War II, and there were many people who tried to escape Nazi persecution, tried to reach Palestine.
right.
Some were turned back, others ended up in Cyprus.
Right.
Is that something you were aware of as a
Of
child?
course, because I was in the army and stationed at a camp,
Which camp?
Beit Lid, Kelet Hamesh, in Netanya.
Okay,
Across-
but this is already after you graduated high school.
Yes,
And
that was in 48.
Okay, but the entire British blockade
Was before.
preceded that.
But it was during that too, because people who were taken off a boat, a ship that made it
Yes.
to the shores of Netanya,
Yes.
were brought into our camp in the middle of the night. We conscripted the young people to the army, and the women and men, older men, were sent to spread over kibbutzim so they would not be found. When the kibbutzim came, when the British army came to, soldiers came to look for people, they could not find them in the kibbutzim. And we conscripted the young people into the army. Mm-hmm. And one man who I met here in Connecticut, 50 years later, was one of the people who came to that camp.
Really?
Yeah.
How did you find it? Is a small. How did you find that out?
We joined, my husband and I joined the JCC in Sherman, Connecticut, and I, talking about myself, said that I come from Israel. So a guy comes over and speaks to me in Hebrew, and of course I knew right away he's not Israeli, but he spoke Hebrew. Said, how come? And it turns out to be he was in 48, coming from a boat, a ship, and the Haganah brought him from the ship in small boats to the shores of Netanya, across the street to Beit Lead, to our camp.
And that's where you were?
That's I was.
Okay.
I was one of 6 girls in that camp.
Why only 6?
This is how they stationed us. I don't know. It was not bad.
Not bad.
Not bad.
You're a cutie. Okay. By the way, that's also some of the romance of the early IDF. It was one of the first armies where you had men and women literally serving together. And there were no rules against men and women dating in the army.
No.
So there was romance, and there was certainly friendship, and this was something you experienced, being one of 6.
Yes.
Very nice.
Yes.
But again, I want to try to distinguish between what you now think as an adult, looking back on events, and what you can remember feeling at the time you were living through this era. When you're in the camp, and here they come, these people who the Haganah literally are spiriting from the shore to your base camp, and then some of them are ending up in the IDF. It's the early Haganah that becomes the IDF, or they're being sent to kibbutzim. Did you appreciate the history of this? Or at the time, you're just living day to day, and no.
No. What surprises me now is that I did not know, as a young girl, 15, 16, even 17 years old, anything about the Holocaust. Nothing about what was happening in Europe. Nothing. I mean, my parents were speaking about I remember when Rommel was in the desert, not far from Israel, the German army.
Rommel.
During Rommel. We lived at that time in Jerusalem. Yeah. After the first bombing, after the only bombing of Tel Aviv, my father decided we are going to live in Jerusalem. So we lived in Jerusalem during the war years, 42 to the end of the war, 45. And I remember my parents were very, very scared. They said, what happens if Rommel's army comes to Israel? He was very close. We could hear the bombings. Yeah. And that was a scary moment. But we did not know, I did not hear my parents speaking about Jews being killed in Europe.
You did not know about Auschwitz?
No.
Treblinka?
Oh, no.
By the way,
Until many years later.
That's fascinating,
yes,
isn't it?
Yes.
And by the way, your husband survived the Shoah.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
Yes.
As you look back on it now again, as an adult with an adult perspective, do you have any idea why that was true? Why did the Israeli, then the Palestinian, the Jew, living in Palestine, pre-state Israel, during World War II, this was not something all around you?
No.
Why do you think that was, Rochelle?
I really don't know if I was here. I don't remember even between friends that we talked about it.
No one.
No one knew about my age, my friends did not know, although later on I discovered one of the boys belonging to our group of kids was a survivor himself.
But you didn't know it at the time.
No. He spoke Hebrew like I speak Hebrew.
Yes?
He looked like he had a darkish skin because he spent time in a kibbutz too. And he came to Tel Aviv and joined our group of kids, going out on a Friday night, a Saturday, and later married my girlfriend.
Okay. We're at the end of World War II, and there's going to be discussion of the implementation, the formal implementation of the League of Nations mandate to create a Jewish homeland. There's going to be a Jewish state, and it's going to be partition between a Jewish state and an Arab state.
Right.
The word Palestinian only referred to you who were Jewish.
Right.
People should remember that at the World's Fair in Flushing, the Palestinian
Pavilion.
pavilion was Jewish.
Right.
Okay. But there was going to be a Jewish state and an Arab state. This is coming. There's going to be a vote in the UN. When I talk to people like Abba Iban, he describes how there was concern that there would not be a vote in favor of partition
Sure, yes.
in November
it was very,
47.
It was, yes,
right?
It was very.
And I want to
yes.
understand whether you, your father, your friends were first aware of this,
Very much so.
and to what extent were you involved in the politics that was leading up to the establishment of the State of Israel?
We were very concerned. We were very concerned and very afraid that there will not be enough votes. And of course, the minute it was,
The vote was
announced,
counted, yes.
yeah, we were dancing in the streets. We were dancing in the streets.
Is that a...
But not the Arabs. They were
just a
not
minute.
dancing.
Is it a euphemism, or did you literally dance?
I did not.
But others did.
Others did, and I was standing on the terrace on Dizengoff Circle and watched the dancers.
And it was a wonderful, euphoric
Very
time.
wonderful time. We thought now we are in heaven. Now everything will be okay. Little did we know.
Little did you know. And I want to point out, our audience, I'm sure most of our audience is very well aware of this. We're talking between 47 and 48.
Correct.
The partition vote in the United Nations is November 1947.
48.
It will
Yeah.
be the following May
Correct.
that the picture you see behind me
Right.
occurs at the Tel Aviv Museum where David ben-Gurion is seen reading the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
Do you remember anything about the intervening months when the Arab world got very upset? From the day the vote occurs at
Yeah.
the United Nations,
Yeah.
if you remember at all how the Arab world reacts and whether you experience anything.
No, I don't remember. I only remember that I thought now we are okay. Now we are going to be okay. We are going to have a state of our own. And I'm not even thinking of what the Arabs are
Okay.
thinking.
Where are you going to high school?
In Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv.
Yes, Tichon Ironi Bet.
And then you told me already, your graduation was moved up
Yes,
to April.
to beginning of April.
And do you understand why?
Yes. Well, at that time, because of the
But
army.
what are you
yeah,
told as a high school senior?
that we need to go into the army. But I didn't know that during the last 2 years of high school, it goes back to 46, that we were very often taken out on camping trips. And those were camping trips, with gear, with everything, to be 2 days away or so and so forth. Turns out to be that those were the training camps.
Yeah, they were getting you ready.
They were getting us ready. In addition to that, the British had imposed curfew on citizens. 9 o'clock, there was nobody in the street. But we, as high school kids, 15, 16, 17 years old, we were messengers. And how were we messengers? Supposedly going to a girlfriend's house to do homework. That was allowed. and we were given messages. Two things. First of all, not everybody in Israel at that time had a telephone at home. And secondly, the telephones were bugged. And so we were the messengers between the leaders of the Haganah.
Were you ever a messenger?
I was a messenger, yes.
Oh, tell me what happened.
Well, I didn't know that the father of this girl was one of the leaders. I just, I was given a message by phone. We had a phone at home to say, you're going to so-and-so's house. You're going to do homework there, and give a message to her father.
Saying what?
Saying, I don't remember, meeting so-and-so, the meeting is in such and such a place.
Okay. Did you understand at that point?
No, I did not really.
No, you just took it for granted.
I did not
I'll give
know.
the message.
I'll give the message.
But actually, you
There's
were a courier.
Yeah, and all my classmates
Okay.
were. I discovered later.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're told you're going to go into the. It's not called the IDF, correct? At
No,
that time?
it's Tzahal.
Tzahal.
הצבא, צבא ההגנה לישראל.
Yes.
צבא ההגנה לישראל.
The defensive
Tzahal.
army
Yeah.
of the state
Yeah.
of Israel.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you know at that time that it's going to be in May that David ben-gurion is going to read the Declaration?
No, we didn't know.
Did you have any sense that the British were formally about to leave?
Well, I read it in the paper.
Okay.
At that time, I read it in the paper that they're planning to leave, and we are hoping the date was set and so on.
Do you remember being excited about that? Was your father excited?
No, I don't think it was no.
Okay.
No.
Just a matter of fact. Okay.
But the excitement was when ben-gurion announced the state. They left right after the 15th.
Yes.
Yeah.
As we left on the
Yeah.
morning that.
Right.
They actually left on the 14th of May.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
A Union Jack was taken down,
Correct.
and the last formal part of the British Army in Palestine
Left.
gets on a boat, and
Yes.
that's that.
Right.
So there it is. It's May 14th, 1948.
Yes.
Where are you? Literally, where are you?
I was going to the army. I was in the army already.
At the camp.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
I was not happy because I was not home. The first time I was leaving home and not able. Well, we were able to go home Friday, sometimes for Saturday, sometimes.
yes, but you didn't need to be on a base as far as you were concerned.
Well, but
But you had to be.
yes, I had.
And you understood you had to
Yes,
be.
yes.
Okay. And then, so you're not at home. You're with your friends
Yeah.
in the
Not with
at the army
friends.
base.
Not with friends. I had
okay,
no friends.
And it's in the afternoon, and
Yes.
David ben-gurion gets up,
Yeah.
and as the picture shows behind me, he reads the Declaration of Independence of the modern state of Israel.
Right.
By any chance, do you hear him read it?
It was with speakers all over the street. You could
Yes,
hear
so
it.
you did hear it.
Yes, yes. I remember excitement.
There was
yes,
excitement.
Yes, of course.
And to what extent do you realize that this is going to mean war?
Right away, actually. Right away, because the Arabs were right away, stopping cars on roads and shooting the passengers. People who had to go from town to town on urgent had to go like with guards, with soldiers in front, soldiers in back, to stop that. And right away we were not we were at war. Right away we were at war. It may have been on a smaller scale, but it was right away at war.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And our audience should know, by the way, the actual fighting began on May 13th at the Etzion block.
That's right.
But the
Gush Etzion, yes.
I'm sorry?
Gush Etzion.
Yes. But the formal invasion of Israel begins on May 15th,
Correct.
the day after the
Correct.
Declaration of Independence was read.
Correct.
Are you in some clerical job, or yes? So you don't carry a gun.
No, but some were. I mean, many women were. Many young women were. Some of them were killed too.
I keep asking you the same question because I want to understand the mood. Was this a frightening time for you?
Yes, definitely. You didn't know how it is going to end. We knew that we had not much ammunition. We had training, yes, but not many people. And we had Arabs all around us who were trained and armed to the teeth.
As you look back, by the way, how is it that Israel survived those days?
A miracle. Of course, by a lot of blood.
Tremendous sacrifice.
Tremendous sacrifice.
Yes.
And our brother was one of them.
Not at that point.
Not at
A little
that
later.
point.
I want
A
to
little
come to
later,
that.
yeah.
Incidentally, he's a younger brother.
He's a younger brother.
So was he in high school at the time?
No, he was 19. Oh, at the time that I'm talking about?
In
Was a
1948.
In 1948, yes, he was in high school.
Okay.
Yes.
And your sister also was in high school?
Good, correct.
Okay. So you're not fighting, but you're seeing the fighting all around you?
Correct. And
And-
hearing it, too. Hearing it.
Which is also frightening, isn't
Very
it?
frightening. You hear it, it sounds closer than it is, really.
Mm-hmm.
And how big is Israel?
And even then it was smaller.
Right. Yeah.
It was ludicrously small when it was
Correct.
created by the United Nations. And then it takes, the war goes on until 1949.
Correct.
People don't have an understanding. There were ceasefires every now and then, but basically Israel was fighting for its life.
Correct.
And then at some point, do you remember thinking to yourself, you know what, we are going to survive?
Not until the very end, really.
Not until the end?
Yeah. In Tzfat, especially, I remember my parents were so very worried about the family in Tzfat because my mother had her parents, my father had his sister. It was a lot of families. They were surrounded by Arabs more than we in
Yes.
Tel Aviv.
Tzfat's on the northern
Yes.
border.
Yes.
And Tiberias, by the way, is on the eastern border.
Correct.
So
They were
Tiberias
very
and
worried.
Tzfat were, in some sense, more exposed
Correct.
than certainly Tel Aviv was.
Because their populations were practically half Arab. Yeah. And so it was very worrisome. I remember my parents were very, very worried.
Okay. Balance for me, there is the euphoria of the state being declared, and now you have a state. And there's also the real life horror of not simply being at war, but it's being at war in your own backyard.
Correct.
Yes?
Correct.
Talk for one moment about how a human being experiences both the euphoria and the horror at one and the same time.
Well, the euphoria is there, but the horror is more
Overwhelms
overwhelms it.
Yes.
Because you don't know what it's going to be. How are we going to get out of this situation alive? How are we going to overcome all those armies? And a lot of it was propaganda from the Arabs. They were doing this and they were doing that and they were doing this. I mean, they were overwhelming here, and they crossed up to this. They were doing a lot of propaganda.
Yeah, they were describing victories that really were not
that
done.
were not there.
But you didn't know that.
I did not know that. And so it was very frightening. It was very frightening.
Okay, one more question in this area.
Yeah.
When you say it was frightening, did you ever imagine that some Arab or Arab army was literally going to come where you were and do you harm?
Not in Tel Aviv. Not in Tel Aviv. But I was worried about my family in Tzfat, in Tveria too. We had friends. My father had his best friend living in Tveria. We were worried about people who were close to the Arabs, because even if you were friendly with some of these Arabs, you didn't know what they were capable of doing the next day, being led by their leaders.
Who were the heroes for you at that time? Were there any?
Or Moshe Dayan,
Yes?
Yigal Yadin,
Yes?
Bar Lev, Rabin was not at my time.
Interesting.
Yes, it was later.
But they were heroes.
Yes, of course. The Haganah, they were our heroes.
Yes. And what about Ben-Gurion?
Well, I don't know if I felt anything about it. I thought he was brave, a brave man to declare the state at the time that he declared it.
Brave.
Yeah,
Yes.
brave. Taking a chance, and because he was told by many of his colleagues and many of his leaders of the Haganah to postpone it, and he says no.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was brave. Yeah.
The picture behind me is iconic.
Yes.
The picture of Ben-Gurion at the microphone.
Right.
But what's so interesting is, before we began taping, you said to me, "Oh, you see the man on the end? I was friends with his son," right?
Yes.
And we're
Yes.
talking about this person over
Yes, yes.
Yes?
That was Behor Shitrit,
here. Yes.
who was in the first government, that was formed in Israel, and he was a Supreme Court lawyer, a Supreme Court judge, and he was my father's best friend, and he was the only non-Ashkenazi Jew in all this group.
He was Sephardi.
He was Sephardic.
It's quite something to be able to be sitting with somebody who knew somebody who's sitting at the table
First
as
cabinet.
David Ben-Gurion. What?
The first cabinet.
The first cabinet. Just amazing.
Yes.
Okay. So lo and behold, the war ends. There's a state of Israel.
Right.
Okay. What do you do?
I decided, well, I was from the age of 14, 15, became interested in design, in
Yes.
fashion design.
Yes.
And I decided that I was going to study design. As a matter of fact, my army duty was not over yet when I heard of a school that opened up for fashion design in Jerusalem. It was a school that was connected to hotel education, hotelier education and fashion industry. And so I decided to apply. And I was accepted there, and I was given a few months off from the end of my duty. So I did not serve a whole 2 years. It was 2 years less 4 months, something like that, because school started there earlier. I remember I went to the entrance exams in my army uniform. Yeah, I was the only one there who was a soldier. And I was accepted. So I had 2 years of fashion school there, and then I decided to further my studies. I loved it. I wanted to revolutionize the fashion industry in Israel. I thought they did not have much of a industry, especially not for young girls. And so, with the encouragement of my mother, because my father wasn't really so keen about it, I applied to schools in New York. I applied to Parsons School of Design and to Pratt Institute. Thank goodness I was accepted in both. Decided that I was going to Parsons because I decided that I wanted to live in Manhattan, not in Brooklyn. And so I came in 1952. That was already 2 years after I was in Jerusalem. In 1952, in November of 1952. And started school in January of 1953. And loved it, loved it, loved it.
Okay.
From the very first day till I graduated.
Yes, and
yeah.
it became really so much part of your life.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we've talked about how your own journey from 45 to 52, you're coming to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about your brother. Your brother was named Shlomo?
Correct.
Incidentally, your family name was?
Goldzweig.
Goldzweig.
Yeah.
So Shlomo Goldzweig was your younger brother.
Correct.
What happened to him?
When I left Israel, he was 17. I was 22. There was 5 years difference between us, 5.5 years. And he went into the army at 18 after high school, just like I did, just like my sister did. But there was a war of attrition.
Explain
And
to our audience.
the war of attrition was not a daily war. It was incidents here and there and here and there. Well, he was in the army. He was in a reconnaissance unit, and his jeep went on a mine, and he was killed. He was 19, and it was 1955.
What was he like?
Well, I talked to my brother. He was a gentle, gentle soul. He was very handsome, very mathematically oriented, and he used to build model airplanes and fly them from our rooftop in Tel Aviv when he was a young guy, before I left. After that, he wanted to go into the Air Force, but he did not make it. I don't remember what is the cause, but he was an officer in the army, the regular army. Yeah.
Look, there's no way to make something good out of this. It's a horrible tragedy for a family.
Yes.
To lose a child, and to lose a child in what is really a senseless way.
Right.
Did it have any effect on the way you or your parents felt about being an Israeli?
No, it was never a question of it was never a question, but it killed my father.
It did.
Yeah. After that,
He wasn't the same.
no. And 2.5 years later, he died at age 57, very young.
Very young.
Yes.
Somehow your mother was able to survive better.
My mother was a very, very strong woman. Oh my God, when I think about what she went through. Very strong woman. She lived with us here in the United States for 13 years until she remarried and went back to Israel.
Nice story.
Yes.
Yes. So you meet your husband,
Right.
Max.
Right.
Yes. And he has his own interesting story.
Which he told me on the second date. I couldn't believe it.
You couldn't believe what?
I couldn't believe the horror of that thing. How a person got through it, and I could still talk to him like to a human being.
His family basically had escaped.
Yes. Not
Right.
escaped. They were hidden.
They were hidden.
Right.
In a bizarre way.
Underground.
Underground.
Yes.
For a long time.
For 10.5 months. Without seeing the light of day, without being able to stand up.
It's unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
And where was
Before
it?
that, they were in ghetto. It's not like they came
Yes.
from their luxurious
They went
home.
from one horrible place to another.
Correct.
But where they ended up was even more horrible.
Correct.
Yes. And remind me, where was this?
It was in Vilna,
In Vilna.
where
Okay.
he was born, where his parents were born.
Okay. But he does survive.
He does.
As you look back at your life with him, how did that experience affect him? Did
He
it
was
affect him?
determined. He was determined to make a life for himself. He came here to the States without anybody. His parents were still not able to did not get any visas to come to the States. He came as a rabbinical student, exchange student. So he was here in the States for 6 years before his parents came to the States, and his brother ended up in Canada. So he was very much, determined to get an education, to go on with his life. He just put it aside and did not like to talk about it.
I find it so interesting that on the one hand, you grow up with one experience. Your experience is the birth of a Jewish nation, the rebirth of the Jewish nation. And you didn't know anything about the Shoah, the Holocaust.
No.
You fall in love, marry, create a wonderful life and family with someone who came out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And he lived the other side of the two extraordinary events that shape Jewish consciousness today and drive Jewish life. It's the Holocaust and Israel, which not are simply two extraordinary events in the 20th century Jewish life. To this day, both of those events are at the center of Jewish identity. In different ways, each of you and your husband experienced that, and then you marry, and in some way it is the marriage of the iconic moments that have created Jewish life today.
Well, one that was distracted,
Yes?
the destruction of the Jews,
Yes.
and the rebirth of the
Yes.
Jews. Yeah, I guess it's a marriage of. Say it was a good it's a good marriage.
It's a good marriage.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And what you represent is very, very powerful. And you've done a marvelous, marvelous job. So let me ask you.
Mm-hmm.
I want now perspective as we sort of wrap this up. As you look at where the state of Israel is now, we're post 70 years from that. What is it that gives you the most pride? And what is it that concerns you the most? And we'll start first with the concern and then the pride. Rochelle, what is it that concerns you most about Israel today?
What is going to be the solution? What is it to the problem of Israel, to the problem of the Palestinians, because it affects Israel. At times, I was thinking, never give up anything, never do anything. Yeah. Now, later on, I decided no. We have to be a little bit more flexible. We have to give them. But what you give? We gave Gaza, and look where we are now. There is no solution that I can see right now.
That's the human tragedy,
That's
isn't
the tragedy. That's a tragedy. The pride I have. I mean, I always was proud to be an Israeli, but now more than ever. I mean, in the field of technology, in the field of science, in the field of in music, in literature, in everything, Israel is a force. A force. And it's all because of education. Mm-hmm. Because of all of education. Mm-hmm. Max always said when we had our daughters born, he said, I can give my children two things. I can give them a lot of love and a good education. After that, it's not up to me.
Yes.
So
that's very, very wise.
Yeah.
And you know, we live in strange times. In some way, we live in difficult times. There is, again, a rise of anti-Semitism, especially in Western Europe and in Eastern Europe, that we thought was over. It was naive to think so. And here in America, there is a disconnect among many American Jews and the state of Israel. And there are many Jews who feel that Israel leans too much to the right, and the Orthodox establishment has too much power, and that somehow pieces of the American Jewish community are very critical of the state of Israel. And there's a worry that the next generation, the generation of your grandchildren and younger, will not feel the tie to Israel that not only you had as an Israeli, but those of us who grew up and lived through the Six-Day War, which is, again, the iconic picture behind you, we had a context that our kids don't have. And so there's this disconnect. And so I want you to end this way. What is the message you would love every American Jew, and for that matter, every American, to keep with them about the state of Israel? And the most appropriate time to hear that is as we celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut. Mm-hmm. What's the message you wish you would love everyone to understand?
Well, you don't always agree with your government, certainly not with the government that you have right now here or in Israel, but the idea that Israel represents has to be the most important thing that is in your life as a Jew. And Israel needs you, but Israel will survive even without you.
Come here. You know how much I love you.
Yes.
You know how much I adore
Yes.
you. You and Max.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad your grandchildren are here as
Yeah.
we tape. What you've done is make a marvelous contribution. By the way, you had a wonderful career of your own as well, so mazal tov on that.
Thank you.
You have brought children into the world who are doing good, extraordinary good. You have grandchildren who are teachers. I mean,
Unbelievable.
it's unbelievable. It's what Max and you created, as you said, coming out of two of the major events of the 20th century.
Right.
And you continue to do so. I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha.
Thank
You and Max. Health
Thank
to 120 and more.
Thank you very much.
And I'm so glad you're there for me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, my
Thanks.
sweetheart.
Thanks.
Rochelle Etingin, a fifth generation Sabra.
Right.
She was in the Tzahal, the Israeli army on May 14, 1948,
Right.
when the state of Israel was born. She's not only living history, but she also brings the word is neshama, you know. She has a Jewish soul that reflects the best, not only of the state of Israel, but of the Jewish people. It was an honor for me to share her with you as we celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut on JBS. And I know all of you join me in wishing all the people of Israel, wherever they came from and wherever they are in life, we wish them the warmest and the most joyous celebrations on Yom Ha'atzmaut. And may this year be for Israel. And when I say Israel, I'm talking about for the Israeli people. I've said to you over and over again, the state of Israel is an idea. It's a marvelous, wonderful idea, but it's people. It's our family. It's men and women and children, all of whom every single one should know peace and prosperity and happiness, and there should be this bond between us, we American Jews who live in, again, an extraordinary moment in Jewish history. We should always be there in connection and in a bond, in family, as Rochelle just described, forever and ever, the Olam Va'ed, the Dor Vador.
Amen.
On JBS, I'm Mark Golub. Chag Sameach for Yom Ha'atzmaut. Be well, my friends.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.